Imagine going to bed tonight with a calm mind, free from the endless noise of stress, fear, and overthinking. Imagine waking up tomorrow not only rested, but stronger, clearer, and more focused than you've ever felt before. Now ask yourself, why hasn't that happened yet? Why do you carry the same weight to bed every night, only to wake up just as tired, just as lost, just as reactive? What are you really doing with those hours between dusk and dawn, numbing the pain with distractions, or silently hoping that tomorrow fixes what you refuse to face today? The truth is uncomfortable. Most people don't rest, they escape. And what you refuse to confront in the quiet of night will tear you apart in the chaos of morning. Sleep is not an escape for the Stoic. It is discipline, it is reflection, it is mental warfare done in silence. Because if your nights are filled with noise, your days will collapse in weakness. But if your nights are shaped with intention, your days will rise with power. What you're about to discover isn't just a meditation, it's a confrontation with yourself, a method to rewire your subconscious, sharpen your character, and finally stop living on autopilot. If you're ready to stop avoiding your own mind and start mastering it, please subscribe. For the version of you that refuses to live another day unconsciously, consider it a step toward reclaiming your life, one quiet night at a time. There's a kind of silence that doesn't bring peace, it brings pressure. You feel it when the room finally goes quiet, when the notifications stop, when no one's speaking, but your mind won't stop shouting. The weight doesn't come from one moment, it's everything all at once. The conversations you wish had gone differently, the glances you misread, the things you didn't say when you should have, the decisions that still linger in the back of your throat. And even when the day is done, it doesn't let you go. It follows you into bed like a shadow that refuses to leave. You close your eyes, hoping for rest, but it turns into a battleground, your thoughts circling like vultures, memories flickering like static on an old screen. Most people think this is normal. They call it stress, anxiety, overthinking, but it's more than that. It's the mental clutter of a life lived without pause, without reflection, without clearing space between days. When you carry everything from today into tomorrow, you're not resting, you're dragging. And the more you drag, the heavier it becomes. The body lies down, but the mind stays upright, pacing, sorting, reacting. That's why so many people wake up exhausted, even after 8 hours of sleep, because they never really slept. They never emptied the mind. They just closed their eyes and hoped for relief. But Stoicism doesn't offer hope. It offers practice. Most people try to control the world while their own thoughts spiral unchecked. They spend the entire day running, doing, replying, reacting, and then expect the night to heal what they never made peace with. The truth is, you don't heal from the chaos unless you confront it. Not in a loud, aggressive way, but in the soft, disciplined way a Stoic faces himself. Honestly, silently, deliberately. What you take to bed with you determines the quality of your rest. Not just whether you sleep deeply, but whether that sleep restores you or drains you further. If your final thoughts are ones of shame, regret, or fear, your subconscious will spend the night replaying that narrative. The cycle continues. But if your final thoughts are grounded in clarity, if you take the time to name the weight, observe it without judgment, and let it go, then sleep becomes what it was meant to be, a reset, not a rerun. This doesn't require hours, it doesn't require some mystical ritual, it just requires intention. Before you sleep, you examine. You don't scroll, you don't numb. You sit quietly and take stock. Not to punish yourself, but to release yourself. Because what isn't examined stays unresolved, and what's unresolved doesn't disappear, it festers. The weight you carry is often not even yours. It's the expectations others placed on you, the roles you think you have to perform, the guilt you inherited, the future you're expected to build. All of it piles up silently until it crushes your peace. The mind becomes a container filled with noise that doesn't belong to you. That's why the night must be reclaimed. It's the only part of the day no one else touches. There are no meetings, no emails, no obligations, just you and whatever you haven't faced. And if you don't face it, it will face you. In dreams, in tension, in that subtle resistance to waking up. Most people think tiredness is physical. Often it's emotional residue. You didn't argue with anyone today, but you rehearsed arguments in your mind. You weren't in danger, but you imagined 10 ways things could go wrong. The nervous system doesn't know the difference. It just responds, and it keeps responding, even as you lie in bed. So the question isn't, how do I sleep better? It's, what am I bringing to sleep that I should have put down hours ago? The Stoic practice isn't about denial, it's about awareness. You don't pretend the weight isn't there. You acknowledge it, you study it, and then you decide what's useful and what's not. That's the mental audit. Not obsessively analyzing your flaws, but checking in with truth. Just enough to know what needs to be carried forward and what needs to be left behind. You can't solve everything in one night, but you can stop carrying things that don't serve you. You can let go of the day in small, disciplined acts, not dramatic ones, just a sentence, a breath, a choice to release. The mind doesn't rest just because the lights go out. It rests when you give it closure. It rests when you say, I've seen enough today, I've learned from it, and now I release it. That's not weakness, that's wisdom, because there will be more tomorrow, more noise, more decisions, more emotions, and you won't meet them with strength if you're still tangled in yesterday. So every night becomes a threshold. Cross it carrying less, and you wake up with more clarity. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." The weight you carry to bed is part of that unconscious. It's not just what happened, it's what you believe about what happened. The story you keep telling yourself, that you're behind, that you're not enough, that you should have done more. These stories become the background music of your life. Low, constant, exhausting. But when you bring them into awareness, when you pause, notice, and question them, they begin to lose their grip. You don't need a perfect day to sleep well. You need an honest one. You need to look at what happened, see it clearly, and decide not to let it define you. That's what Stoicism teaches. That you're not your circumstances, you're your response. And the response doesn't end when the day does. It continues into how you rest, how you reset, and how you rise again. So tonight, when you lie down, don't numb out, don't run. Sit with the weight, name it, and then gently begin to let it go. You're not discarding the day, you're distilling it, keeping what teaches, releasing what drains. And when the mind is clear, the body follows. Sleep becomes a friend, not a fight. You wake up not just alive, but aligned. And when you live aligned, even the hardest days lose their power to break you, because you've learned the quiet strength of putting the weight down before you close your eyes. The body may lie down, motionless and quiet, but the mind never truly sleeps. Beneath the stillness, thoughts are weaving themselves into patterns, unfinished conversations echo, and emotions from the day begin to arrange themselves like books on shelves that never quite stay in order. Most people assume the mind simply shuts off when the body does, but the reality is far more subtle and far more powerful. The Stoics understood this long before neuroscience could explain it. They saw the night not as a place of unconscious drifting, but as a sacred opportunity to give the mind its instructions, to speak directly to the part of us that keeps working while we're no longer watching. Because the thoughts you fall asleep with don't just disappear, they sink deeper. They become the script your subconscious memorizes and replays the next day. That's why so many people wake up already anxious. It's not that something new is wrong, it's that yesterday's unresolved noise kept spinning all night. You didn't sleep so much as stew. You closed your eyes hoping for peace, but what you carried into sleep became the foundation of how you rise. This is what the Stoics trained for, not just battle or hardship, but clarity. They knew that the final hour of your day is more important than the first, because it's the hour where you choose whether to leave your mind untended or to shape it with awareness and precision. That last thought before sleep, that's the seed, and your subconscious is the soil. You don't need a perfect day for that seed to take root, you just need a deliberate one. So many people go to sleep with noise blaring in their heads, screens glowing, notifications buzzing, stories unfolding on TV or scrolling past their fingertips. None of it feels threatening in the moment, but the mind doesn't forget. It absorbs, it stores, and the consequence isn't just restless sleep, it's misdirected energy. Your brain works with what you give it. If you give it chaos, it learns to normalize chaos. If you give it quiet reflection, it learns to seek wisdom even in stillness. The mind is trainable, but it doesn't train itself. It takes instruction, clear, firm, compassionate instruction. That's why the Stoics practiced nightly reflection. It wasn't romantic or ceremonial, it was practical. What did I do well today? Where did I fail to show up as the person I claimed to be? What triggered me? What moved me? What did I learn? These aren't questions meant to bring shame, they're meant to sharpen the blade. Marcus Aurelius didn't reflect to feel good about himself, he reflected to refine himself. He treated each day as a training session, not a performance, and the review was just as important as the action, because that's where growth begins, in the quiet space where you process rather than perform. Even in sleep, your nervous system remains partially alert. Your dreams are often shaped by emotional residue, the unresolved tension, the unsaid words, the unfinished choices. If the last thing you do before bed is distract yourself, you're denying your mind the clarity it needs to clean itself. But if you close the day with a moment of direction, even a single thought like, "Tomorrow I will meet discomfort with patience," you're planting a blueprint for the mind to follow. It doesn't need hours, just honesty, just intention. Seneca understood this deeply. He once wrote, "We suffer more in imagination than in reality," and the mind, left on its own, becomes a factory for imagined suffering. It amplifies the what-ifs. It spins the smallest missteps into stories of doom. But when you give it structure, when you close the day with reason instead of regret, you stop that spiral before it begins. You begin to train your imagination to work with you, not against you. The problem is, we've normalized chaos. We've accepted that the mind runs wild at night. We treat it like a storm we have no control over. But that's not true. You do have a say. You just have to stop running from the stillness long enough to hear what your mind is trying to show you. The same way you don't let a fire burn unattended, you don't let the mind roam without awareness. You guide it, not with force, but with presence. You tell it where to look, you remind it what matters, and then you let go. The most dangerous part of letting your mind run freely at night isn't the immediate anxiety, it's the slow, invisible shaping of who you become. Every unexamined thought becomes easier to think again. Every replayed fear becomes more familiar. Over time, the pathways deepen. You start becoming someone who expects tension, who assumes the worst, who forgets how to meet life with calm. That change doesn't happen overnight. but it starts overnight. In the moments when your mind is most suggestible, most open. So what are you feeding it? Carl Jung once said, "What you resist persists." If you resist examining your thoughts, they won't disappear. They'll fester in the background, leaking into your emotions, your relationships, your decisions. But if you sit with them, even for 5 minutes, even without solving anything, just naming them, witnessing them, you create space. And space is everything. Space allows you to respond instead of react. It allows you to place your hand on the steering wheel of your mind, even if just for a moment. The Stoic approach isn't cold or emotionless. It's disciplined compassion. It's asking the question, what do I need to confront before I close my eyes? And then listening. Sometimes the answer is a feeling you've been avoiding. Sometimes it's a pattern you didn't notice during the rush of the day. Sometimes it's something good, something you need to anchor more deeply. Because the mind doesn't just replay what hurt, it also strengthens what healed. But only if you give it your attention. Only if you say, "This is worth remembering." Imagine giving your mind a job before sleep, not a command, a quiet task. Review the day, find what matters, let go of what doesn't. That alone begins to change your relationship with night. It turns sleep from escape into training, from survival into intention. You stop dragging yesterday into tomorrow. You stop waking up with a weight you didn't choose. Instead, you rise a little clearer, a little more grounded. And over time, that clarity compounds. The power of this practice isn't in how long it takes, it's in how often you repeat it. The repetition forms a rhythm, a signal to your brain that the day is complete, that it doesn't need to carry every burden forward, that it can soften, settle, breathe. You're not teaching your mind to be silent. You're teaching it to be wise, to know what to hold and what to release. When your head touches the pillow, the training doesn't end. It begins. What you think in those final moments shapes the architecture of your rest, and that rest shapes the architecture of your next day. A Stoic doesn't chase control, they create alignment. They sleep with purpose, so they can rise with strength. So tonight, when everything quiets down, don't waste the moment. Don't fill it with noise you won't remember. Fill it with meaning. Sit for a moment in stillness. Let your mind bring forward whatever needs to be seen. Don't argue, don't analyze, just listen. Then speak to it, not with fear, but with clarity. Give it a single message, a direction, and then sleep, knowing you've already begun the work. Not through struggle, but through awareness. Because even while you rest, your mind keeps moving. The only question is, will it move with intention or without you? At the end of the day, the world quiets down, but your mind doesn't. You turn off the lights, but the thoughts remain lit. Not loud, maybe, just persistent, lingering. The comments you brushed off but still think about. The hesitation that cost you a chance. The small courage you showed but no one noticed. This is the space where the evening audit begins. Not as a punishment, not as a chore, but as a clearing. You don't need an hour. You don't need perfection. You need presence. Just a few honest moments with yourself before the noise of the day becomes the background hum of your dreams. Marcus Aurelius used to ask himself, did I live according to my values? And in that question, there's no accusation, only alignment. You're not chasing flawlessness, you're checking the compass. That's all. Did I act like the person I say I want to be? Did I speak with truth, even when silence was safer? Did I let fear drive me, or did I pause long enough to choose? These aren't questions to make you feel guilty. They're questions that bring you back to yourself. Without them, the day slips by without meaning. And then another, and another, until you're living by momentum instead of principle. The audit isn't about fixing everything, it's about noticing. Because what you don't notice, you can't change, and what you don't acknowledge will keep shaping your behavior quietly, day after day. Most people wait for disaster to reflect. The Stoic reflects before the storm hits, not to avoid it, but to be ready, to be sturdy. And the evening is the perfect time, because the world has done its talking. Now it's your turn to listen, to sit in the echoes of your actions and see what they say about the life you're building. You might find that the victories are quiet. You said no when you usually would have said yes just to please someone. You stepped away from an argument instead of proving your point. You made space for someone else's perspective, even if it challenged yours. These things don't earn applause, but they deserve recognition, because those are the moments your character is shaped, not in grand gestures, but in private choices. The audit lets you notice them, and that noticing strengthens them. You'll also find where you fell short. Maybe you lied. Maybe you avoided a hard truth. Maybe you snapped, even though the person didn't deserve it. That's part of the process too. You don't fix it by beating yourself up. You fix it by being honest enough to say, "This isn't who I want to be," and compassionate enough to say, "But I'm still allowed to try again tomorrow." This is what it means to train your mind with Stoic discipline. Discipline that doesn't shame but sharpens. When you skip the audit, you carry yesterday's weight into tomorrow. The frustration lingers. The mistakes blur into habits. And you don't even know why you feel heavy in the morning. You think it's stress or lack of sleep. But often it's just unresolved behavior. You didn't clear the fog. And so you wake up still walking through it. Reflection is the broom, the breath, the release. It's what makes tomorrow possible instead of just a repeat of today. When you don't look at what you've done, what you've chosen, what you've avoided, you don't escape it. You just stop seeing it, and then it governs you. But when you do look, something shifts. Even if it's uncomfortable, even if the mirror isn't flattering, you've taken control. You've opened a space between who you were and who you're becoming. This isn't a new ritual. It's an old one, ancient even. The Stoics practiced it daily, not because they were obsessed with performance, but because they were devoted to growth. They knew that a person who never stops to evaluate their choices is doomed to keep making the same ones. But a person who reviews their day becomes an author of their life, not just a character in it. This is what the audit gives you: authorship, ownership, a way to step back and say, "This is where I stand, and this is where I need to go." You don't need to write it all down, though that helps. You don't need a journal with perfect handwriting or a quiet mountain cabin. All you need is a pause, a few questions, a willingness to be seen by yourself. The world won't see this part. No one will praise you for it, but you'll feel it. The shift, the weight dropping, the focus sharpening, the alignment returning. You'll start to sleep not as an escape, but as a preparation. The audit softens your relationship with regret. It teaches you that imperfection is not failure, it's feedback. It trains you to respond to your mistakes with clarity, not with collapse. You begin to say things like, "Next time I'll speak slower," or "Next time I'll walk away sooner." And those small intentions begin to accumulate. They shape your self-trust. They build a quiet confidence that doesn't rely on external validation. Because you know you're watching yourself. You know you're learning. There's something beautiful about ending your day with honesty. It grounds you. It quiets the noise. It gives you closure without needing everything to be perfect. You stop needing to explain yourself to others because you've already done it privately, with sincerity. You stop needing to defend your decisions because you've already examined them. You begin to rest, not in ignorance, but in understanding. The evening audit isn't a ritual for the weak. It's a ritual for those brave enough to face their own reflection without flinching. For those who know that growth doesn't come from ignoring the parts of yourself you dislike, but from including them, learning from them, and gradually choosing better. This is how you change. Not through force, not through pretending, but through small, honest meetings with yourself, day after day. So tonight, when the noise fades and the world stops asking for your attention, turn inward. Ask the questions that matter. Listen to the answers, even if they sting. And when you lay your head down, do it knowing you've already taken the first step into tomorrow, with your eyes open, your mind steady, and your spirit aligned with the person you're becoming. That's not just rest, that's renewal. And it begins with a simple choice: to look. The hardest part about change isn't knowing what to do, it's being honest about what went wrong. Most people carry their mistakes like a secret shame, hiding them under distractions or pretending they never happened. But avoidance has a cost. It doesn't protect you, it blinds you, and that blindness keeps the pattern alive. You find yourself in the same situation with the same regret, telling yourself, next time will be different, but never really knowing why it wasn't different the last time. The Stoic understands this. They don't fear the flaw. They look it in the eye and ask what it's trying to teach. Awareness isn't about self-punishment. It's about self-respect. You have to care enough about your future to face the truth of your past, not in a way that rips you apart, but in a way that realigns you, that grounds you. And that begins with asking a better question, not what's wrong with me, but what happened there and how can I handle it differently next time? That shift in tone makes all the difference. It moves you from guilt to growth, from shame to strategy. Seneca once wrote, "No man is crushed by misfortune unless he has first been deceived by prosperity. We are crushed not by our failures, but by the illusion that we were supposed to avoid them completely. The truth is, you'll mess up. You'll say things you didn't mean. You'll act from fear instead of wisdom. You'll fall short of your own standards. And that's not a reason to feel worthless. It's a reason to refine your awareness. The goal isn't perfection, it's precision, to locate the turning point, the hesitation, the moment you chose silence when you should have spoken, or acted quickly when you needed to pause. There's power in being able to say, that's where it slipped. You're not blaming the world. You're not collapsing into self-pity. You're just tracing the thread back to its source. That level of clarity is rare, because it takes courage to name your part in the pain. But the moment you do, the cycle begins to weaken. You stop being at the mercy of your own habits. You start becoming deliberate, directional, focused. Shame, on the other hand, pulls you in the opposite direction. It makes you hide. It makes you feel like the mistake is your identity, not just your action. And once you start thinking that way, it's hard to grow. Because growth requires movement, and shame freezes you in place. That's why Stoicism teaches awareness without judgment. You examine the event not as a prosecutor, but as a philosopher. You ask what it means, what it reveals, and how you can meet that moment differently if it returns. You'll find that the same scenarios tend to repeat until you learn the lesson. The face might change, the job might change, but the dynamic stays the same until you respond differently. And the only way to respond differently is to see clearly, to study the pattern without emotional fog. This is where reflection becomes transformation. You're not dwelling, you're designing. You're saying, I see what I did, and I see what I can do. Clarity is painful at first, because it dissolves excuses. It removes the comfort of blaming others. But what's left behind is strength, quiet, steady strength. The kind that says, I don't have to be flawless. I just have to be aware. and that awareness becomes the foundation of your decisions. You begin to catch yourself in real time. You notice the rising anger before it spills out. You sense the pull toward distraction before it takes over. You pause. You choose. That kind of self-control isn't forced. It's built through moments of observation, through reviewing your actions without twisting them into shame. You learn to separate the behavior from your identity. You're not a failure. You're a human refining their process. That distinction matters. It creates space for growth, for self-respect, for forward movement without carrying a backpack full of guilt. You might wonder why it's so hard to forgive yourself, and the answer is usually because you haven't understood yourself. Forgiveness follows understanding, and understanding follows attention. The more clearly you see your behavior, the less you need to defend it. The less you need to pretend it didn't happen. You accept it. And that acceptance isn't weakness, it's awareness, the very fuel of transformation. Carl Jung said, "I am not what happened to me, I am what I choose to become." That's the bridge between reflection and power. You're not frozen by what you did. You're awakened by what it showed you. You begin to realize that the discomfort of awareness is temporary, but the clarity it brings can reshape your entire life. You start to crave that clarity, not because it feels good, but because it gives you freedom. Freedom from repetition, from confusion, from self-sabotage disguised as self-protection. There's something deeply noble in being able to name your faults with honesty, but not hatred. That's the Stoic posture, the willingness to say, yes, I failed here, but I will not build my identity around that failure. I will build it around the discipline to respond better. That shift creates a momentum of self-respect, not arrogance, not perfectionism, but respect. Because you are showing up, you are facing yourself, you are learning. And when you can do that, your mistakes become your teachers. Your regret becomes your compass. Your flaws stop being flaws and become functions of learning. You no longer obsess over being perfect. You commit to being present, to noticing the moment when the mistake is forming. And that moment becomes the fulcrum of your strength, the quiet, internal pivot where your future is decided. This isn't a mindset for those who want easy answers. It's a mindset for those who want real change, who are tired of the loop, who want to wake up and see the day differently because they faced the night honestly, who want to close their eyes not in denial, but in peace, because they know they've looked at themselves and made a quiet promise, not to be someone else, but to be someone better. The next time you catch yourself rehearsing your mistakes like a punishment, stop. Ask instead, what is this moment trying to show me? And what can I do, not to erase it, but to evolve because of it? That's the foundation of transformation. That's the core of Stoic sleep. Not escaping your day, but digesting it. Not shaming your mind into silence, but guiding it toward clarity. And in that clarity, you'll rest easier, not because life got easier, but because you became wiser, more grounded, less defined by your wounds, and more defined by how you've healed. That's awareness without shame. That's the work that changes everything. There's something subtle about strength that most people miss. They look for it in grand displays, in loud achievements, in obvious wins, in the days where everything lines up and feels effortless. But that's not where it lives. Real strength is quieter. It shows up when you hold your tongue in the middle of a storm, when you get out of bed even when your chest is heavy, when you respond calmly instead of reacting violently. These aren't dramatic moments. They're invisible to almost everyone, but not to you, and not to the subconscious mind that's always listening, always learning, always recording. Each time you act from your better self, even when no one sees it, you are laying down another brick in the foundation of your inner strength. It's easy to overlook these moments, to treat them as insignificant. You didn't yell, but you wanted to. You didn't quit, but you thought about it. You pushed through the task, even though your motivation was nowhere to be found. These seem like minor things, but they're not. They're training. Every act of restraint, every small decision to keep going, sends a message to your identity. This is who I am. You're not just surviving your day, you're shaping yourself with it. That's the part most people ignore. They're so focused on what went wrong that they forget to see what went right. There's power in noticing your small victories, not because you're trying to inflate your ego, but because you're trying to reinforce your discipline. The mind works through repetition. It strengthens what it's reminded of. If all you do at the end of the day is replay the mistakes, then the mind starts to believe that's all you are. But when you take a moment to say, "There, I stayed patient. There, I acted with clarity," you're not just congratulating yourself. You're giving your subconscious a blueprint. You're telling it, "This is what strength looks like. Let's do it again." Marcus Aurelius said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." Realize this, and you will find strength. He wasn't talking about dramatic power. He meant the subtle command over your own reactions, the decision to slow down when you feel like speeding up, to pause when you want to explode, to try again when it would be easier to shut down. These aren't loud moves, they don't get applause, but they build a kind of internal gravity, a pull toward your better nature. You don't need a perfect day to prove your growth. You just need one moment of control, one moment of courage, one moment where you didn't give in to the version of you that wants to stay stuck. That one moment, when acknowledged, becomes the seed of the next. And soon, what started as a single act becomes a pattern, a rhythm, a way of being. It starts to feel natural, even when it's difficult, because your mind has practiced it, your body has moved through it, your spirit has been shaped by it. Most people will never see the strength it took for you to hold yourself together when everything inside was falling apart. They'll never know what it meant for you to show up, to keep your word, to be kind when you were hurting. But that's okay. It's not for them, it's for you. You're the one building something real, something that doesn't rely on circumstances or recognition. You're building character. And character is what remains when the noise fades, when the pressure hits, when the world isn't watching. These moments don't have to be dramatic. Sometimes strength is as simple as choosing a glass of water over the fifth scroll through your phone. Sometimes it's stepping outside for a breath instead of spiraling into the argument. It's setting your alarm for the next morning, even when the day just drained you. These are small moves, but they're significant, because they're yours, they're chosen, and what is chosen repeatedly becomes who you are. It's easy to chase the idea of transformation through big, sweeping changes, but most people who chase that burn out, because they ignore the value of the small. They forget that a wall is not made of one giant slab, it's made of bricks, laid one at a time, pressed together with patience, and each brick matters. Miss enough of them, and the wall crumbles. But place them with intention, and over time it holds strong, even against the weight of life. Strength isn't just what you feel when you're confident. It's what you build when you feel weak. It's what you choose when you're uncertain. And in the quiet of your evening, when your mind begins to reflect, it's those tiny choices that speak the loudest. "I kept going," they whisper. "I didn't break." And that whisper is louder than any praise the outside world could ever give you. This is why the Stoics practiced reflection, not to punish themselves, but to notice, to catch the thread of progress, to reinforce what's working so that it grows stronger. Without that awareness, the good moments pass by unnoticed, and the mind becomes conditioned to see only flaws. But with awareness, the mind becomes an ally, It starts looking for strength rather than shame. It begins to associate resilience with identity. Carl Jung once wrote, "What we do not make conscious appears in our lives as fate. If you don't consciously mark your strength, it fades into the background. And then you forget how far you've come. You forget what you've survived. You forget that even when everything felt heavy, you moved one step forward. And that forgetting robs you of momentum. But remembering creates resilience. It gives your progress a spine. You don't need to broadcast your small victories. Just respect them. Just notice them. Let them inform the story you tell yourself about who you are. Not a victim, not a mess, not someone who's falling apart, but someone who keeps showing up, someone who keeps trying, someone who keeps building, brick by brick, the inner strength no one can take away. Every evening when you pause to review your day, find that one thing, that one moment of control, and honor it. Let it be the thread you follow tomorrow, because these aren't just moments, they're momentum, and with enough of them, you become unshakable, not because life gets easier, but because you've gotten stronger where it matters most, quietly, internally, consistently. That's the kind of strength that transforms your nights, that resets your nervous system, that allows you to fall asleep not with regret, but with a quiet pride. The kind that says, "I did something hard today, and I chose well." You don't need to win the world, just win yourself. Moment by moment. That's where it all begins. There's a moment each night when everything starts to settle. The world outside begins to quiet. The noise, the tasks, the decisions, they start to slow down. And in that space, in that strange stillness between your last thought and your first dream, the truth begins to rise. Not the truth you tell others. The truth that only shows itself when there's nowhere left to run. That's why so many people keep running. Because silence is unsettling. It's confronting. It's where all the feelings you buried during the day come crawling back. But what if that discomfort isn't your enemy? What if it's your teacher? We've been trained to reach for noise, to fill every empty space with entertainment, distraction, stimulation. A song in the background, a podcast while brushing your teeth, one last scroll through the feed before your eyes finally close. But none of this prepares you for sleep. It delays it. It clutters it. It turns your rest into an escape rather than a recovery. What the Stoics knew, what many have forgotten, is that stillness isn't something to avoid, it's something to practice. There's something sacred about sitting in silence at the end of the day. No screens, no music, just you and the quiet. At first it can feel unbearable. Your mind races. Thoughts you didn't invite start marching through. Regrets, anxieties, embarrassments. All the things you tried to push away suddenly sit beside you in the room. This is the moment where most people reach for something, anything, to numb it. But if you can resist that urge, something powerful happens. The noise begins to burn off, and beneath it, you find clarity. The Stoic doesn't fear silence because they understand it's not emptiness. It's exposure. It's where you meet yourself without distractions. And in that meeting, you begin to see clearly what you avoided, what you denied, what you truly want. In stillness, the mask slips. The ego quiets. The core starts to surface. This is why silence is preparation. Because when the lights go off and your mind is left alone, what you've rehearsed all day is what will echo through the night. Carl Jung once said, "Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakes." That line takes on a new weight in silence, because silence demands inwardness. It won't let you hide behind noise or movement. It forces you to listen to the thoughts you suppressed, the instincts you ignored, the values you betrayed. But it also helps you remember. You remember what actually matters, what brings peace, what you want to become. You begin to strip away the false layers you wore to survive the day. And when you do, something unexpected happens. The silence stops feeling threatening. It starts feeling safe. It becomes the place where your real voice lives, not the reactive one, not the angry one, not the performative one. The honest voice, the one that whispers things like, "Let it go," or "You're doing better than you think," or maybe, "You need to have that conversation." That voice gets drowned out when you're always filling your head with more, but in silence, it finally gets space to speak. There's a sharpening that happens in stillness. Like a blade drawn gently across a stone, your awareness starts to refine. You notice patterns. You catch impulses before they grow into actions. You see the gap between your automatic reaction and your chosen response. And in that gap, there is power. That's the preparation part. You're not just ending the day, you're preparing the mind for how it will meet tomorrow, whether it will be reactive or intentional, whether it will follow emotion or lead with wisdom. Most people don't sleep, they crash. They exhaust themselves with information and screens and endless stimulation until the mind just shuts down. But that's not rest, that's sedation. True rest comes from deliberate unwinding, from returning to the self before the day ends, from choosing to meet your thoughts instead of running from them. And when you do that, your sleep becomes something deeper. It becomes a time when the mind, already aligned, carries your intentions into your subconscious. You don't just sleep better, you become better. You don't have to sit for hours. Just a few minutes of real stillness before bed can change everything. Light dimmed, screens off, no agenda, just breathing, just being. And if it's hard at first, that's okay. That means you're doing it right. Growth doesn't always feel good, but it always leaves something behind, something quieter, something stronger, something clearer. The silence you once feared begins to turn into a mirror, not the kind that reflects your face, but your mind. It shows you where you've been honest and where you've pretended, where you've grown and where you've stalled. And unlike external judgment, it's not cruel. It doesn't punish. It reveals, it guides, it prepares. And each time you return to it, that mirror becomes a little less foggy, a little more illuminating. You start to see yourself not through the lens of comparison or expectation, but through presence. And in that presence you begin to change. You start to carry less, because you've begun to process more. The day doesn't stick to you the way it used to. Conversations don't replay with the same sting. Mistakes don't define you because you've started tending to them, quietly, privately, but consistently. You've turned silence into a tool, into a ritual, into a place you visit every night to clear the mind, settle the spirit, and remind yourself who you are. That's what Stoic sleep really means. Not just unconscious rest, but deliberate preparation. It means entering the night not as an escape, but as a continuation of your discipline. It means refusing to be at the mercy of a restless mind and choosing instead to meet it with stillness, with courage, with presence. And over time, this practice changes your days too. Because the more comfortable you become with silence, the less control the world has over you. You don't need to react to every noise. You don't need to fill every gap. You start to listen more, speak less, respond with intention, think before moving. You become someone who carries stillness within them, even in chaos. So the silence that once felt like a threat becomes your sanctuary. A place you go to remember who you are, a place you go to align yourself with what matters. And every night, as you return to that place, your mind becomes clearer, your decisions more deliberate, your rest more restorative. You become, little by little, the person who is no longer afraid to face their own thoughts. Because now you understand, they're not enemies, they're guides, and they've been waiting to speak all along. You don't simply drift into tomorrow. Whether you realize it or not, you rehearse it. In the quiet hours of the night, when the day has finally loosened its grip, your mind doesn't just wind down, it rewinds, reviews, and replays. It watches you like a silent observer, pulling back the curtain on moments you rushed through, decisions you didn't fully consider, words you wish you had said differently or not at all. And in that mental theater, a choice quietly emerges. You can either leave the past untouched, or you can plant something different for the morning. That's where reflection becomes more than memory. It becomes a form of rehearsal, not for perfection, but for precision. You begin with acknowledgement. You don't look away from the fact that you lost your temper. You don't sugarcoat the way you dismissed someone's feelings. You don't rationalize the way you chose avoidance over courage. You name it, clearly and honestly, not to drown yourself in guilt, but to begin reshaping the way you show up tomorrow. This is the beginning of transformation, the moment where awareness turns into responsibility. The Stoics never believed reflection should end at observation. Marcus Aurelius wrote not just to record what had happened, but to sharpen how he would respond next time. He saw the page not as a place to vent, but as a place to train. Each entry was a quiet commitment to do better, to become more composed, more courageous, more focused. You do the same when you take a moment before bed and shift your narrative from passive regret to active intention. You say, "I hesitated when I should have stepped forward. Tomorrow, I won't." And with that simple phrase, you begin to rehearse a new version of yourself. The human brain doesn't differentiate much between mental rehearsal and lived experience. That's why visualization works. That's why athletes train in the mind before they perform in the arena. Your subconscious listens closely to what you tell it at night. If you end your day replaying shame, resentment, or helplessness, you carry that energy into the next one. But if you choose to end your day with even the smallest seed of, "Next time, I'll meet it differently," you begin to carve a new path. It's not magic, it's direction. It's the gentle shaping of character through the repetition of intention. Carl Jung once said, "You are what you do, not what you say you'll do. But what you rehearse in thought often becomes what you do." That's why the Stoic mind doesn't just reflect, it scripts. It lays out how it wants to respond to challenge, how it wants to speak in discomfort, how it wants to act when tested. Because the future is never truly random. It reflects the patterns you've been practicing, whether consciously or not. Every small correction you mentally note, "Tomorrow I will listen longer. I'll speak less when I'm angry. I won't rush to defend my ego," is like laying down a stone. One stone doesn't build a path, but thousands do. Over time, these nightly rehearsals become the framework of how you move through the world. You don't just wake up and hope to be better. You wake up having already met the version of yourself you're aiming to become. And each day that version becomes more familiar. You may not get it right the next morning. That's fine. The point isn't to be flawless, it's to be more conscious. The point is that when the same challenge returns, and it will, you don't meet it blind. You've already walked through it in your mind. You've softened the reactive edge. You've rehearsed the pause. You've reminded yourself of the values you want to protect. And in that tiny space between impulse and action, something new has the chance to breathe. The problem isn't that we make mistakes, it's that we repeat them without reflection. When you end your day mindlessly, those missteps become habits. But when you end your day intentionally, you begin to chisel away at what no longer serves you. You turn reflection into refinement. You stop letting the past be just a weight and instead use it as a guide, not to punish yourself, but to lead yourself. It's like shaping clay. If you walk away from the wheel and never return, it hardens as it is, misshapen, lopsided, rough. But if you return each evening with wet hands and gentle focus, you can smooth the edges, realign the form, and over time create something that resembles what you actually intended to make. You are not stuck with today's version of yourself. You are not doomed to repeat the same patterns just because they're familiar. You have access to the wheel, and every night you get to sit at it. This is where the deeper strength of Stoicism lives, not just in philosophy, but in practice. It's not just about knowing what's right. It's about rehearsing it, about quietly preparing for the moments that test your patience, your integrity, your humility. It's the commitment to say, I may not have chosen well today, but I'll be ready tomorrow. And that one sentence, spoken without shame but with clarity, begins to shift the course of your entire life. You don't need to write it down, though that helps. You don't need to meditate for hours, though that might deepen the insight. All you need is a few quiet moments of presence, a soft review of the day, a calm decision about what to bring into the next one. No dramatics, no perfectionism, just you, observing the lines of your life and slowly deciding which ones to draw differently. That's the rehearsal. That's how the future is shaped, not by accident, but by intention, not by control, but by clarity. You sleep not as an escape, but as a quiet workshop, where the mind, gently and without pressure, begins to shape the character of tomorrow. And when you wake, you rise not just as who you were, but as who you've been quietly preparing to become. Every night, whether you're aware of it or not, your brain is still building. The lights may be off, your body still, and the room silent, but inside your mind, construction is underway. Networks are rewiring, memories are being sorted, and emotional residue from the day is being integrated. What's often missed is that the input you feed this system right before sleep becomes the blueprint for what's built. You don't just fall asleep, you hand over instructions. The brain doesn't decide whether to absorb what you gave it. It simply obeys. That's not opinion. That's biology. And it's also ancient wisdom. Neuroscience now confirms what philosophers thousands of years ago already practiced in silence. The brain consolidates memory, reinforces learned behaviors, and strengthens emotional patterns during sleep. It's not a passive state. It's a lab, one where thoughts, feelings, and unfinished conflicts are carried into the night like ingredients into a fire. That's why the moments before you sleep are not just moments. They're entry points. They decide whether you wake up clearer or more chaotic, stronger or stuck. You don't just rest, you rehearse. You don't just dream, you deepen. This is where the Stoics were far ahead of their time. They didn't wait for the morning to begin their discipline. They understood that what you do before you sleep matters just as much, if not more, than what you do after you wake. Seneca, in particular, would reflect each evening on his choices, reviewing his emotions and actions not to punish himself, but to program clarity. He wrote, "When the light has been removed and my wife has fallen silent, I examine my entire day." That was his ritual. And whether he knew it or not, he was handing his mind clean material to organize instead of chaos to magnify. But today, many of us do the opposite. We go to bed scrolling, consuming whatever drama, envy, anger, or noise the world throws at us. We fall asleep comparing, complaining, replaying arguments that didn't end well. And then we wonder why we wake up irritated, distracted, and anxious. It's not a mystery. You planted rage and restlessness in the soil of your subconscious, and now you're living among the weeds that grew overnight. Your mind did its job. You just didn't give it the right assignment. So the real question is not whether you're programming your mind. The question is, What are you programming it with? Are you reinforcing insecurity by replaying your failures? Are you strengthening resentment by revisiting someone's betrayal? Are you deepening confusion by ending your day in chaos? Or are you, even for 5 quiet minutes, feeding your mind with clarity, purpose, and direction? Because it will build either way. It just needs you to decide what kind of architecture you're laying down. What you choose to bring into your mind before sleep, your final thoughts, your emotional state, your mental posture, becomes unconscious material. It seeps into the blueprint of how you respond to life the next day. And if you do this mindlessly for months or years, you begin to mistake this architecture for who you are. You don't realize you built it. You assume it's just your nature. But it's not. It's your repetition. Now, imagine doing the opposite. Imagine going to bed not just exhausted from the day, but intentional about the night. Imagine closing your eyes with the quiet thought, "Tomorrow, I'll meet resistance with calm," or "I'm letting go of what no longer serves me." Even just one clean sentence is enough to redirect the machinery, because the brain will follow. It's not loyal to negativity, it's loyal to repetition. And when clarity becomes your ritual, strength becomes your default. This is why bedtime is not just about unwinding, it's about aligning. It's a sacred space to gently separate yourself from the noise of the world and reconnect with your own inner compass. Not with force, not with pressure, just with quiet commitment. You don't need to control every thought, just steer the direction of the last few. That's enough to begin reprogramming what your mind builds while you sleep. This isn't about being perfect. Some nights you'll forget. Some nights the weight of the day will drag your mind in every direction. That's okay. The point is to build a pattern, not a prison. The more you practice feeding your brain intentional thoughts, the more natural it becomes. The grooves get deeper, the reflexes get faster. Over time, your mind becomes a garden where you plant fewer regrets and grow more resilience. It's no longer just about how long you sleep, but how deeply your sleep contributes to who you're becoming. If your last thoughts are of gratitude or courage or stillness, that's what you strengthen. If they are of bitterness, anxiety, or distraction, that too becomes your script. It's not about positive thinking, it's about responsible imprinting. You are the author, whether you write consciously or not, and that's where real power lives. In knowing that even rest can be a form of resistance, that even sleep can be an act of discipline, not because you're fighting, but because you're choosing to let go of what doesn't deserve to live in your tomorrow, choosing to reinforce the parts of you that act from wisdom, not reactivity, choosing to whisper to yourself before the world gets a chance to yell. There's a quiet beauty in knowing that transformation doesn't always roar. Sometimes it's as soft as a thought before sleep. Sometimes it's as small as a sentence that aligns your focus. Sometimes it's the courage to end your day with intention, even if the rest of it was noisy and scattered. That's the strength Stoicism teaches, not just how to endure life when you're awake, but how to shape it even when you're asleep. So tonight, ask yourself, what do I want to give my mind to build with? What instructions am I leaving behind when I close my eyes? Because the mind is listening, it's waiting, and it will build whatever you give it. Give it something worth waking up to. There's a practice so quiet, most people never hear of it. So gentle, most avoid it. Yet so powerful, it becomes the armor you never knew you needed. Negative visualization. Not in the way anxiety imagines worst-case scenarios to torment you, but in the way wisdom prepares the mind for life's inevitable changes. It's not pessimism, it's not paranoia, it's premeditated clarity. The Stoics knew that suffering is not just in what happens, but in being unprepared when it does. So they practiced loss in their minds, not to bring about despair, but to loosen its power. We live in a culture that tries to numb loss, distract from endings, cover absence with noise, but avoidance is not protection. When we refuse to imagine something valuable being taken away, whether it's a person, a status, a health, or a moment, we give fear the element of surprise. And fear, when unexpected, paralyzes, but when met intentionally, it transforms. The Stoic looks gently at the possibility of loss and says, yes, this too may vanish. And in that admission, something strange happens. Gratitude awakens, attachment softens, presence sharpens. This is not morbid, it's not cold, it's loving in the deepest way. Because when you imagine your child not waking up tomorrow, your voice becomes softer tonight. When you consider the end of a relationship you take for granted, you stop scrolling while they speak. When you picture your body no longer moving the way it can today, you stretch a little longer, you breathe deeper, and you smile more sincerely. You realize, this might not last, but it's here now, and it deserves your full awareness. Most people wait to be grateful until something is taken away, but the Stoic reverses that. They borrow the pain of absence to amplify the richness of presence. It's not about living in fear, it's about living awake. Carl Jung said, only the paradox comes anywhere near to comprehending the fullness of life. And in this paradox, you hold two truths, that you love something deeply and that it may disappear. Not to suffer more, but to love better. It's easy to say we know everything is temporary, but knowing it intellectually is different from feeling it viscerally. It's in the feeling where real change happens, and that's why you rehearse it. You close your eyes and imagine the house being empty. You imagine the job being gone. You imagine your reflection in the mirror aging faster than you expected. And in doing so, you bring your mind into alignment with reality, not the fantasy of permanence, but the truth of impermanence. You stop negotiating with time as if you control it. You begin to partner with it instead. This visualization isn't an act of surrender. It's an act of strength. You don't visualize loss to give up. You do it to reclaim your footing before the storm arrives. To remind yourself that you can stand in silence and still breathe. That you can face the idea of loss and not crumble. Because the worst thing isn't loss. The worst thing is pretending it can't happen and then being shattered when it does. When you practice it calmly, in the stillness of thought, you're building a mental resilience that no panic can steal. Think about how most people react when the worst happens. They're caught off guard, broken by the speed of it, blindsided by life's ability to change direction without asking permission. But the one who has visualized gently and repeatedly has already made peace with that possibility. It's not that it doesn't hurt, it's that it doesn't destroy, because they've already shaken hands with the shadow, they've already sat at its table, and when it finally visits, they recognize it, not as a stranger, but as a quiet teacher they've seen before. You don't need to rehearse this for hours, just a few moments each night before sleep. Not to induce fear, but to dissolve it. Sit with the thought, what if I lost this tomorrow? And then, instead of spiraling into panic, anchor yourself. Feel the sadness, feel the calm, let them coexist. And then, return, with more reverence, with more patience, with more clarity about what actually matters. You might find yourself more forgiving, more understanding, less reactive, because the small frustrations of the day shrink when you've stared gently into the idea of real loss. The missed call, the spilled coffee, the delay in plans. None of it deserves your peace. Not when life is so fragile, not when love is so fleeting, and not when you've tasted the possibility of absence in your thoughts. This practice changes the way you move through the world. You stop rushing. You speak with more care. You listen with more attention, because everything becomes a miracle when you've rehearsed its disappearance. Not in a dramatic way, but in a quiet, anchored way. You become the person who says, "I've already been here," in thought, in reflection, and I've survived it. That kind of mind cannot be shaken easily. And there's another gift hidden in this. When you visualize loss, you start to prioritize what's essential. You stop wasting time on shallow battles. You stop pretending that approval or attention will save you. You begin to simplify, to let go, to root yourself in what actually holds weight, not the opinions, not the trends, but the timeless things. Connection, character, presence. These become your foundation. Negative visualization is not about predicting tragedy. It's about preparing your heart to face the world without illusion. And when done right, it's not heavy. It's liberating, because you no longer cling. You no longer beg for permanence. You simply live, fully, honestly, and awake. The pain of loss will still come, but when it does, you won't collapse. You'll stand, not because you're numb, but because you're ready. So tonight, before the day ends, try it. One small practice. Picture one thing you love vanishing, just for a moment. Not to punish yourself, but to remind yourself. To remind yourself of the miracle that it exists at all. And let that remembrance shape how you treat it now. Let it soften you, let it sober you, and above all, let it prepare you. Because the truth is simple. What you make peace with in your thoughts, you don't fear in real life, and what you've faced in your imagination, you're less likely to run from in reality. The Stoic doesn't seek comfort, they seek readiness, and in the quiet trial of negative visualization, they find it. Every single time. There's a kind of peace that doesn't come from everything going right, but from realizing how much remains even when everything feels uncertain. After you've imagined loss, not to frighten yourself, but to prepare, you begin to look around and see things differently. The pillow under your head isn't just a pillow, it's presence, it's comfort, it's safety. The roof over you is no longer just structure, it's shelter, it's stability. And that next breath you take, it's not just air, it's life, silently choosing you again. Gratitude isn't something that floats in when life is perfect. It arrives when you've seen what it could be without. This is the quiet transformation that takes place when you visualize hardship first. You stop waiting for something big to make you feel alive. You begin to notice the small things that have been there all along. The way your blanket folds over your shoulder, the hum of the room when everyone is asleep, the fact that your heart keeps beating without you asking it to. There's a richness in this awareness that no success or achievement can replicate. It's not loud, it doesn't announce itself, but it stays with you long after the lights go out. You see, most people confuse gratitude with positive thinking, but the Stoics never practiced gratitude as a way to cover up reality. They practiced it as a way to stand beside it, completely, soberly, honestly. Seneca once wrote, "You act like mortals in all that you fear, and like immortals in all that you desire." That imbalance, the way we panic at what might go wrong while feeling entitled to everything going right, that's what steals our peace. But when you face fear first, when you rehearse the possibility of losing what you love, you reclaim the balance. You stop expecting life to give you more and start appreciating that it's giving you anything at all. This isn't about pretending everything is okay. It's about seeing that even when things aren't, there's always something that is. Maybe the day didn't go your way, but your body still carried you through it. Maybe you feel misunderstood, but your mind is still here, capable of reflection, capable of growth. These are not small things. They are the very things that carry you when the world feels heavy. And once you've visualized what it would feel like to be without them, Even for a moment, they become illuminated in your awareness like stars against a dark sky. Gratitude born from contrast is different. It's not reactive, it's chosen. It's not shallow, it's deep. Because it wasn't handed to you in a moment of ease. It was forged in the realization of fragility. You looked at the storm and saw how close it could come. And when it passed, you didn't just forget. You remembered. You carried the lesson into the next moment, and it changed the way you held everything after. There's something about walking through that inner trial, the negative visualization, that strips away the noise. It cuts through the drama. Suddenly, you're not asking why things aren't better. You're asking how you missed how good they already are. The ordinary becomes sacred. The mundane becomes meaningful. And this isn't romanticizing pain. It's recognizing that meaning isn't always loud or extraordinary. It's found in the softness of what remains. And that's the power of this reflection at night. You don't wake up the same. You rise a little slower. You hold your coffee a little longer. You stop rushing through the morning like it's a checklist, because now it feels like a continuation of something precious. The whisper stays with you. This moment matters. Not because it's grand, but because it's here. When you carry that gratitude into your day, it shifts the way you respond to the world. You don't snap as quickly. You don't complain as often. You don't feel as entitled. Because deep down, you remember the quiet vision you sat with the night before. The vision where all of this was gone. And instead of feeling scared, you feel awake. Awake to the truth that nothing is promised, but everything that is a gift. This kind of gratitude isn't about lists or journals, though those can help. It's about a felt experience, a psychological grounding, the kind that doesn't waver when life gets hard because it wasn't built on good days alone. It was built on the full spectrum, on the willingness to feel both presence and potential absence, to stand in the middle of that paradox and still choose to love what's here. Carl Jung once said, "Even a happy life cannot be without a measure of darkness." The word happy would lose its meaning if it were not balanced by sadness. In that same spirit, your appreciation deepens not in spite of what might go wrong, but because of it. You aren't afraid of the dark anymore. You've sat with it. You've listened to it. And now, when the light returns, even briefly, you see it differently. The storm, real or imagined, leaves behind something subtle, not just relief, but a reorientation, a recalibration of how you see the world, and you don't need a dramatic event to remind you of that shift. Just a simple practice, just a few minutes of quiet rehearsal, just the courage to think for a moment, what if this was gone? And then the power to return, not panicked, but present. When people talk about gratitude, they often speak of counting blessings. But maybe the real gift is learning to feel them, to sit in silence, visualize the absence, and then open your eyes to presence and feel something move in you. Not because you have everything, but because you recognize anything at all. And that's where resilience begins. That's where emotional strength grows. In this earned, practiced, unwavering gratitude. Let that be what you carry into tomorrow. Not a checklist of what you're thankful for, but a felt reverence for what still surrounds you. Not because it's guaranteed, but because you've already imagined its absence. And that thought didn't break you, it built you. This moment, right here, right now, is enough. Not because it's perfect, but because it's still here, and you are too. Let that be your anchor. Let that be your quiet triumph. And let it echo softly in everything you do. This moment matters. There's a strange kind of clarity that only mortality can offer, not in the form of tragedy or fear, but as a quiet reset. A single question whispered at the end of an ordinary day. What if this was my last one? Not to haunt you, but to clear away the noise, to strip down the day to its rawest truth. What would matter? What would rise to the surface? When you ask that question, not from panic but from presence, you begin to see life not as a series of tasks or obligations, but as something sacred, fragile and fleeting. Most people avoid this thought. They distract themselves from it with plans and playlists, with work and entertainment, pretending that life is a constant stream that never ends. But the Stoic doesn't turn away. They lean in, not because they're morbid, but because they understand that only when you confront the end do you see what's truly worth doing. Seneca once wrote, "Let us prepare our minds as if we'd come to the very end of life. Let us postpone nothing." That posture isn't grim, it's empowering. It cuts through the trivial, through the excuses, through the drama that normally clogs the mind. When you imagine this as your final evening, something subtle but profound happens. Regrets come forward, not to shame you, but to guide you. That conversation you've been avoiding, the apology you keep postponing, the dream that's been sitting in a drawer, suddenly they glow with urgency. And it's not about scrambling to fix your whole life in one night. It's about noticing what tugs at you the most. That's where your values are pointing. That's where your energy needs to return. You don't have to announce your revelations. You don't need a dramatic gesture. Sometimes the most powerful shift begins in silence. A decision made with the lights off. A quiet promise to yourself. Tomorrow, I won't wait. You begin to move with more care. You stop living as if time is unlimited. You begin to write with intention, speak with sincerity, and pause long enough to actually feel what's happening around you. There's a kind of strength in living close to your end, not in a desperate way, but in a deliberate one. Because when you remember you won't be here forever, you also remember that the people around you won't be either. You begin to look at them differently. Their flaws shrink, their presence expands. The little things, eye contact, a kind word, a shared silence, become enormous. Because you're no longer playing the game of later, you're living in now. And now, as fleeting as it is, becomes enough. This isn't just philosophy, it's a way of aligning yourself. Mortality, when accepted, resets the compass. It asks, are you where you need to be? Are you doing what you were meant to do? Not what pays the bills, not what pleases others. What fulfills that deeper calling? What gives your soul weight? The mind resists this question. It wants routine, it wants comfort. But the heart knows. And when mortality walks into the room, even just in thought, it wakes that heart up. Carl Jung once said, "Life is a short pause between two great mysteries. That short pause, that's what you're living now." And the tragedy isn't that it ends. The tragedy is that we often forget it's happening. We wait for some perfect moment to really live, but that moment doesn't exist. All you ever have is this one. And sometimes the only way to realize its worth is to imagine its absence. Think about how different you treat something when you know it's the last time you see someone, the last time you walk through a door, the last time you say goodnight. Suddenly, your attention sharpens, your senses heighten. You're more alive in that moment than in 100 rushed ones. Now imagine bringing even a piece of that awareness into every ordinary day. Not by pretending you're dying, but by remembering you are living on borrowed time. This thought doesn't have to make you sad. It can actually be the most freeing realization of your life. Because when death stops being a shadow that chases you, it becomes a light that guides you. It reminds you that no one is promised another sunrise. So what are you going to do with the one you have? And again, it doesn't mean rushing to complete some grand purpose overnight. Sometimes it just means giving yourself to the moment fully, listening without looking at your phone, saying thank you and meaning it, choosing peace when anger wants your voice. These things sound small, but when you imagine not having the chance to do them again, they grow in meaning. The practice of contemplating mortality isn't about fearing the end. It's about choosing to begin again, every single night. To reset your priorities, refine your focus, and re-enter your life with new eyes, with less attachment to distractions and more commitment to presence. And slowly, over time, this becomes your rhythm. Your way of living isn't shaped by fear of loss, but by appreciation of breath. You become someone who doesn't waste moments, someone who doesn't postpone love, someone who doesn't fear regret, because you face it early and you act. And maybe that's what makes you powerful. Not how long you live, but how clearly you see, how much you can hold the fragility of life without flinching, how deeply you can care, knowing you don't get forever. There's no need to romanticize death, but there is power in letting it sharpen your life, letting it whisper the truths we forget. You're not stuck, you're waiting, you're not lost, you're hiding, you're not too late, you're distracted. So tonight, before you drift off, don't just run through your to-do list. Ask the real question: if this was my last day, did I show up? And if the answer is no, that's not defeat, it's instruction, because now you know where to start. Not tomorrow, not next week, but now. And that's the gift, that's the reset. Not dread, not pressure, just presence, finally remembered. This question, when used wisely, doesn't create anxiety. It creates alignment, because the real tragedy isn't dying. It's arriving at the end without ever having lived on purpose. Let this night be your reminder to begin again, quietly, boldly, with your heart wide open. There's a heaviness that anger brings. It tightens the chest. It replays the same scene over and over again in your mind. The raised voice, the dismissive gesture, the thing they said that left you stung and stewing. And if you're not careful, that anger doesn't just ruin your afternoon or your evening. It crosses the threshold. It slips into your bed. It stains your sleep. And suddenly, the one who hurt you isn't even in the room, but they're still in your mind, pulling strings, stealing peace, shaping your dreams. This is why the Stoic refuses to carry it. Not because anger isn't real, but because it doesn't belong in the one place meant for healing: rest. You don't have to deny that you're angry. In fact, denying it only gives it more power. The Stoic approach isn't about suppressing, it's about inspecting. You pause. You name the emotion without shame. You say, "I'm angry because I felt disrespected," or "I'm angry because I had an expectation that wasn't met." And then, with calm honesty, you go even deeper. What part of me was threatened by this? Is it pride, control, fear of abandonment? Often the thing we think we're mad at is just a mask. Underneath is something softer, something wounded, and once you see that, the fire begins to cool. It's easy to think that letting go means letting them win, but that's a trick of the ego. Holding on to rage doesn't punish them, it punishes you. You walk around with clenched fists while they sleep peacefully, unaware. And even if they do feel your anger, what has it solved? The pain remains, the distance grows. The energy you could have used to build something stronger, within or outside yourself, is wasted defending a feeling that no longer serves you. As Marcus Aurelius said, "The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury." The power isn't in retaliation, it's in removal, from the storm, from the grip. There's something almost sacred about choosing peace at night. It's a small rebellion against the chaos of the day, a way of saying, "This ends here." You're not forgetting what happened, you're simply refusing to carry it into your dreams. Because dreams are where healing begins, where the mind sorts itself out, where clarity is born. But if your inner world is clouded with anger, that clarity never comes. You wake up tired, restless, already on edge, and the cycle repeats. Until one night, you say no more. Let the anger come, let it be seen, but then let it go. Breathe it out, literally. Feel the heat in your chest and release it through your exhale. Not once, not quickly, slowly, repeatedly, as many times as it takes to soften the grip it has on you. Sometimes it'll take longer than you'd like. But each breath is a vote for freedom. Each pause is a declaration. You don't get to follow me here. Carl Jung believed that anything repressed would eventually erupt in unhealthy ways. That's why this isn't about repression. It's about transmutation. You acknowledge the anger, and then you choose what to do with it. You journal. You speak to someone you trust. You move your body. You let it live somewhere other than your bloodstream. And when it has no more fuel, you return to stillness. It's important to remember, anger isn't always loud. Sometimes it's quiet. It simmers. It disguises itself as coldness, sarcasm, avoidance. And that form of anger is even more dangerous because it pretends to be nothing at all. But it still weighs you down. It still poisons your presence. So even if you're not raging, ask yourself gently, is something unresolved within me tonight? That question can be the beginning of emotional honesty. This practice of releasing anger isn't about being soft, it's about being smart. Anger clouds judgment. It narrows your vision. It hijacks your reactions. And if you're trying to build a meaningful life, one with clarity, compassion, discipline, then you can't afford to hand the wheel over to that kind of chaos. Not even for a night. Especially not for a night. There will be nights when the anger feels justified, when what they did truly was unfair, cruel, thoughtless. That's when it gets harder. That's when your mind will say, they don't deserve peace. And that's when you remind yourself, this isn't for them, this is for you. You're not letting go because they earned it. You're letting go because you've earned better. You deserve a nervous system that isn't hijacked, a body that isn't bracing for a fight that already ended, a night of sleep that heals instead of haunts. You won't always get it right. Some nights, the anger will sneak in. You'll replay the moment. You'll feel your heart race. That's okay. Awareness is the win. Even noticing it is the first step in weakening it. The more you practice, the faster you'll catch it, and eventually your body will learn. This is a safe space. We don't carry battles into the bedroom. We don't fight in our dreams. We rest, we restore, we return to peace. This is the strength the Stoics lived by. Not loud revenge, but quiet control. Not emotional numbness, but emotional mastery. The ability to feel deeply and choose wisely. The discipline to know what to carry and when to lay it down. The courage to say, I won't be ruled by what hurt me. I'll be guided by what frees me. So tonight, before you close your eyes, check the door of your mind. What are you bringing into sleep? Is it something you'd want to wake up with? If not, leave it here. Leave it now. Anger doesn't get to cross the threshold. You deserve better. Not because the world gave it to you, but because you decided to give it to yourself. And that's the kind of decision that shapes everything. Sometimes peace doesn't come from solving every problem. It comes from changing the angle, stepping back, zooming out. Most of us live life pressed up against the glass, staring at details we've turned into giants. That unpaid bill, that awkward conversation, that message left unread. We make them mountains because we never step far enough back to see they were always just stones. And when the pressure builds, when your mind feels trapped in a small room of spiraling thoughts, that's when the Stoics offer a different path. Rise, not in ego, but in awareness. Close your eyes and imagine this. You leave your room, rise above your street. The noise fades, the drama, the tension, the tightly wound emotions, they start to look like ripples in water. You rise higher. Your city becomes a patchwork of lights. The problems you swore were too heavy to bear now look like shadows on pavement. Higher still, and now you're looking at continents, at clouds, the whole earth. And you, a single human being, living a single moment in a world that's billions of years old and endlessly unfolding. That isn't meant to make you feel small in a shameful way. It's meant to free you, to remind you that no moment, no mistake, no stress has the power to define you when placed in context. You are not the storm. You are the sky that holds it. The more distance you gain, the more power you reclaim, because from above, things make more sense. You see the pattern, the movement, the part you play, not as the center, but as a thread in the fabric of everything. And somehow that shift dissolves the weight you've been carrying. Marcus Aurelius, who ruled an empire and faced more pressure than most of us ever will, practiced this mental zoom-out constantly. He wrote, "Observe always that everything is the result of change." He saw that no event, no emotion, no challenge was fixed. It all flowed. And when you zoom out, you start to see that truth in your own life. You realize this moment of anxiety, it will pass. This burst of anger, it will cool. This confusion, this failure, this regret, it's just a point on a line that keeps moving forward. We spend so much time looking at our lives from the inside that we forget what it looks like from above. We confuse a single bad day for a bad life, a rough season for permanent defeat. But zoom out, and you'll remember how many times you've already survived what you once thought you wouldn't. You've changed, adapted, recovered, not because you had all the answers, but because you kept going. And from the sky, that perseverance looks like strength. There's another gift that comes from this perspective: humility. Not the kind that makes you feel worthless, but the kind that makes you feel connected. You see that billions of people are breathing alongside you, each with their own stories, losses, hopes, and healing. You see that others are hurting too, that you're not alone, that the pain you carry is part of something deeply human. And instead of feeding your ego, you feed your compassion. You soften, you grow. This detachment doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you stop clinging. You stop letting every up and down define you. You stop reacting as if every moment is life or death. And in that spaciousness, you find room to breathe, to think clearly, to respond instead of react. You don't lose yourself. You find a calmer version, one that sees things for what they are, not what fear or pride distorts them to be. Some people confuse detachment with apathy, but they're nothing alike. Apathy is numbness. Detachment is clarity. It's the ability to say, yes, this matters, but it's not everything. It's the skill of holding your emotions without being held by them, and that's a rare kind of freedom, one that lets you move through chaos without becoming chaotic, one that helps you make decisions from wisdom, not from panic. Try it next time you feel overwhelmed. Step back in your mind. Ask yourself, how will I see this a month from now, a year? From the edge of my life, will this moment still seem this loud, this defining, this terrifying? Usually the answer is no, not because it's not hard, but because it's not ultimate. Life is bigger than this. You are bigger than this. And that's the view from above. When the Stoics trained their minds to think cosmically, they weren't escaping reality. They were grounding themselves in it. In the truth that life is short, that most worries are illusions, and that peace comes when we place things in perspective. Even Carl Jung said, "The greatest and most important problems of life are all fundamentally insoluble. They can never be solved, but only outgrown. And zooming out is how we begin to outgrow them." You don't need a telescope to practice this. Just a pause, a moment to close your eyes and imagine yourself rising above, not to abandon your life, but to see it clearly, to recognize that what feels like everything today will one day be a memory, a chapter, a line in the story, not the whole book. And maybe, just maybe, from that height, you'll begin to see the beauty in the mess, the poetry in the pain, the hidden harmony in what once felt like chaos, because from a distance, it all fits, it all belongs, and you too belong, not as the center, but as part of the great unfolding whole. And in that truth, there is peace, not because your problems disappear, but because they've returned to their proper size. Everything begins with the breath, not with thought, not with action, but with that invisible rhythm quietly anchoring you to this exact moment. When your mind races, when your chest tightens with anxiety, when the past echoes or the future threatens, there is one place that never leaves you behind. The breath. It doesn't argue, it doesn't rush, it simply returns. And in that return, you're reminded that peace isn't something you chase, it's something you remember. Most people overlook it. They search for calm in distractions, relief in outcomes, but the body always knew. Before words, before plans, before the world trained you to perform instead of feel. That soft inhale, that gentle exhale, it's a lifeline. And not in the dramatic sense, in the most ordinary, beautiful sense. Because each breath is proof that you're still here. And if you're still here, you're still able to choose your direction. Even if everything feels broken, you are not powerless. You have a place to stand, and that place is always one breath away. The Stoics knew this, even if they didn't call it mindfulness. They understood that presence is power, that if your mind is hijacked by a future you can't control or a past you can't fix, you're absent from the only place where change can happen, this moment. Breathing isn't a retreat, it's a return to the battlefield, a way to look at your thoughts, not through the lens of fear, but from the grounding of now. When you breathe consciously, you disarm chaos. You turn noise into silence, not by force, but by focus. And it's not about deep breaths that you only take when overwhelmed. It's about building a relationship with breath like it's your teacher. Because it is. Every inhale invites you to open. Every exhale asks you to release. It's not just about calming down. It's about training your mind to listen, not to the panic or the pressure, but to the quiet wisdom under the noise. That's what the breath does. It slows the world down long enough for you to hear what actually matters. Try this. The next time you're about to speak in anger, pause. Feel your breath. Let it touch your ribs, your chest, your stomach, and then respond. Not react. Respond. From a place of clarity, a place where you remember who you are and who you're trying to become. That simple breath can be the difference between a moment you regret and a moment you grow from. Nighttime is when the breath becomes even more important. When the world quiets down, the mind tends to grow louder. Regrets echo, plans spiral, emotions bubble up. But the breath, unlike thoughts, asks nothing from you. It's just there. A soft metronome that says, let it go. Whatever it is, that conversation, that expectation, that self-judgment, let it pass with the exhale. Not because it doesn't matter, but because you've carried it long enough for today. There's something sacred about closing the day with a breath, not a dramatic ritual, just a quiet acknowledgement that this day is over, that it doesn't need to be relived, replayed, or rewritten. It needs to be released. And the breath teaches you how. Every inhale welcomes a new beginning. Every exhale lays something to rest. You don't need to fix everything before sleep. You just need to return to yourself. And you do that through breath. The body never lies, even when the mind does. Even when the thoughts spiral into shame or worry, the breath stays honest. Shallow when you're stressed, deep when you're calm. It reveals you, and in revealing you, it heals you. So instead of fighting your emotions, follow the breath. Let it guide you back to stillness, to truth, to the place where you're not trying to impress, explain, or escape. Just breathe. This isn't about perfection. Some nights your breath will be shaky. Some days you'll forget to return. That's okay. The breath doesn't hold grudges. It doesn't punish. It waits. And when you're ready, it leads you back home. You don't need a retreat or a ritual, just a willingness to pause, to feel, to be here without needing to be anywhere else. And maybe that's the real lesson, that you don't need to become someone else to be at peace. You just need to be where you are, to trust that right here, inside your own skin, inside your own breath, is enough. It's not about becoming a master of stillness. It's about remembering that stillness was never lost. It was just buried under noise. So tonight, before you close your eyes, do nothing extraordinary. Just breathe. And in that breath, feel the weight you've been carrying begin to lift. Not all at once, but enough. Enough to sleep. Enough to rest. Enough to wake up tomorrow with a little more space in your chest and a little more strength in your steps. Because each breath, practiced with awareness, becomes a seed of patience, a seed of courage, a seed of peace. And when those seeds take root, you don't just change how you feel, you change how you live, quietly, steadily, one breath at a time. Everything you think you own can vanish, the house you sleep in, the bed you lie on, even the body you inhabit, all of it, borrowed, temporary, subject to forces far beyond your control. We go through life holding tightly to these external things, believing they define us. But they don't. Not really. They decorate the stage, but they are not the actor. If everything around you were stripped away, your name, your possessions, your routines, what would be left? That's the question that stands quietly at the edge of each night, waiting for you to face it with open eyes and an honest heart. When you sleep, you don't take your house with you. You don't take your social media following. You don't carry the labels the world gives you. All you take is what you've made of yourself, your thoughts, your virtues, your values. The mind doesn't care if you wear expensive clothes or eat at fine restaurants. It cares about the integrity you've cultivated, the discipline you've shown, the self-control you've practiced when no one was watching. And this is what Stoicism reminds us. True wealth is inner character. It's who you are when all comfort is gone and no one is clapping for you. It's easy to think that security lies in routines, habits, the familiar sights and sounds of our life. But routines can be broken. Familiarity can fade. What if tomorrow everything changed? What if the world you knew was replaced by uncertainty? In that moment, you wouldn't be asking how much money is in your bank account. You'd be asking something far more urgent. Do I have the strength to endure this? That's why you don't build your identity on what can be taken. You build it on what you choose: courage, resilience, kindness, wisdom. These are not luxuries. They are survival skills of the soul. Carl Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." That doesn't happen by accident. It doesn't happen by drifting through your days or collecting more distractions. It happens in the quiet, in the hard decisions, in the moments when you choose discipline over impulse, compassion over pride, honesty over ease. You build your character one choice at a time, and the truth is, that's the only thing that will ever really belong to you, not your job, not your titles, not even your relationships, just the person you've shaped inside the walls of your own mind. So, what is sleep really? Not an escape, not just a break from the demands of the day. Sleep is the forge. the place where all the raw material of your experiences, reflections, and emotions are melted down and reshaped into something stronger. And when you step into that sleep with awareness, when you take even 5 minutes to ask yourself, what kind of person am I becoming? You begin to shape more than just a restful night. You begin to sculpt a life that doesn't crumble under loss, a life that doesn't unravel when comfort disappears, a life that's anchored from within. You can lose your home and still be at home within yourself. You can lose your job and still carry value. You can be forgotten by the world and still walk with purpose. Because character doesn't ask for permission. It doesn't beg for approval. It's not flashy or loud. It's silent, like a mountain. And in that silence, it watches how you treat people, how you respond to stress, how you handle power. These are the things that follow you, not just into sleep, but into every new morning, into every new beginning, no matter where life takes you. Some nights you'll lie awake, thinking about things you can't control, worries, regrets, what-ifs. But the real question is always the same. Am I proud of how I responded today? Not whether you won, not whether people liked you, just, did I show up with integrity? If the answer is yes, then no matter how messy the day felt, you've built something. You've taken another step into becoming someone that no loss can erase. And if the answer is no, that's okay too, because the night is not the end, it's the mirror, and tomorrow you try again. The person who grows in stillness is not the one who has figured everything out. It's the one who returns to the foundation again and again, who treats each breath as a teacher, who uses silence not as a hiding place, but as a sharpening stone. Character isn't built in one breakthrough. It's built in repetition, in reflection, in the tiny invisible moments no one else sees. That's why your room doesn't need to be perfect. Your life doesn't need to be polished. The only thing that matters is what you're building inside. You don't sleep to forget your struggles. You sleep to fortify the self that will face them again. And when you understand that, your entire relationship with rest changes. It stops being passive. It becomes preparation. A moment of peace, yes, but also a moment of purpose. Because you know that when the sun rises, you're not starting from zero. You're carrying with you the strength earned in the dark, the calm forged in silence, the resilience shaped by choosing what's right over what's easy, even when no one is watching. That's the paradox of real power. It's invisible. No one can touch it. No one can steal it. It grows quietly, almost unnoticed, until the day you need it. And when that day comes, you don't panic. You don't fall apart. You stand tall, not because you've never been tested, but because you've trained for this, in thought, in reflection, in stillness, and all of that training lives within you. That is what you own. That is what endures. So tonight, as the world slows and the noise fades, let yourself remember this simple truth. You own nothing but your character, not your bed, not your body, just the way you respond when life humbles you, just the way you treat others when no one's watching, just the quiet dignity you carry into every room, every silence, every storm. You don't sleep to escape the world. You sleep to return to it, stronger, steadier, and more grounded than the day before. And that kind of strength, it cannot be taken. It can only be built, one breath, one thought, one night at a time. When the world feels uncertain and everything you thought you owned begins to fade, remember, what truly belongs to you is what no one can take. Your choices, your strength, your character. Let that be your foundation. Let that be your home. Thank you for being a part of Stoic Journal. If this spoke to something deep in you, watch one of the suggested videos on the screen. We made them for minds like yours.